Ms. Braceras, Justice Ginsburg quote about the Equal Rights Amendment falling 3 states short of ramification has already been referred to, and she said it should start all over again. Given how rare it is for our history to amend the Constitution, do you agree with Justice Ginsburg that the amendment process should start over to ensure constitutionality and the confidence of the American people?
I do, and particularly because the circumstances have changed so much that the amendment that is currently before you today is effectively a different amendment than the one that the states voted to approve, that the 35 states voted to approve in the early 1970s. I would also argue that 62% of the American voters, at least 62%, were not of voting age or were not yet born at the time that the states first considered this amendment. The majority of American voters today are women, and today's women and their elected representatives in the states should have an opportunity to weigh in on whether or not this is necessary in 2023.
Also to you, the Department of Justice issued an opinion that the Equal Rights Amendment has expired. Expired was their word, and it is constitutionally required that the process start again. So can you talk about why this is the case and what effects it would have on the amendment to continue as it stands? And I think you already spoke to that point a little bit, but if you want to expand on it, feel free to do that.
Yes, sir. When the amendment fails to garner 38 states in the time allotted by Congress, the amendment died. And there's nothing to, there's effectively, you're talking about lifting a deadline on something that no longer exists. It died when it expired in 1979, I would argue. Some people argue it expired in 1982, but regardless, it is dead now, and therefore cannot be resurrected from the dead.
Yeah. Professor Foley, the Supreme Court held that Congress could fix a reasonable time for ratification about an amendment. Congress fixed a time for this constitutional amendment, and of course this expired. Are you aware of any constitutional amendments that were ratified after the deadline for ratification of the amendment?
No, this is the only one.
Also, do you explain to us whether Congress has the constitutional authority to pass a proposed amendment without a ratification deadline, and then years later impose a ratification deadline before the threshold for state ratification has been satisfied?
No, as I said in my testimony, the only power Congress has is under Article 5, and that is to make a proposal that is submitted to the states. Once that proposal is submitted to the states, your job is done and you're locked in. And you can't change it by simple majoritarian resolutions in the future. So, for example, your mode of ratification that you choose can include not only a ratification deadline should you choose to impose one, but it can also include, and does generally include, the mode of ratification that's expressly mentioned in Article 5, which is specifying whether the ratification should occur via state legislatures versus state conventions. And once you pick state conventions or state legislatures, you're also locked in, just like you're locked in on the deadline. So whatever mode of ratification you pick is fixed.
Yeah. And my last question will be, do you also, Professor Foley, what are the legal risks of disregarding the ratification deadline for this constitutional amendment?
Well, I think the biggest problem of all is that if you sort of arrogate to yourself through a majoritarian resolution the idea that you have this sort of new power to change the mode of ratification, then that means the mode of ratification, including picking state legislatures versus state conventions, and any deadline, is changeable at whim of any future Congress. And that's a moment of constitutional instability. It's deeply unfair to the states who have always treated your modes of ratification as fixed and binding on them. And it basically guts the supermajoritarian process of Article 5. So I think it's a very dangerous precedent to set.
Thank you, Senator Grassley. Next is Senator